My name is Sarah, and this is my Real Food Kitchen. Today is January 1st, 2017, so Happy New Year, everyone. And I'm going to show you how I make buttermilk scones today. A scone is basically a biscuit, more or less. The main difference, really the only difference is when I think scone, I think like a cream tea scone, which means that it's either sweet or served with sweets, whereas a biscuit, think chicken and gravy. Within the recipe, there's not that much difference. Scones come to us from Great Britain, specifically Scotland. And in Scotland and UK, they say scone. And we're here in the US and we say scone. And I'm in Minnesota, so I say scone. Not really, but something like that. So scones in the UK are mostly rolled out and cut with a biscuit cutter. Or cut with a knife into triangular shapes. That's what's traditional. I personally make a drop scone because, number one, they're easier. And number two, I don't have to handle the dough as much. And a scone is one of those types of doughs where I feel the less you handle it, the more delectable your scone is going to be. So let me first talk to you about the flour that I'm using. I am particular about all of my ingredients, and I have recently become very particular about the flours that I use. This flour is just an ordinary white flour, which I think is appropriate for a scone. But it is milled fresh within days, like actually 2 days ago at a local miller's where they make bread, but they also, luckily for me, sell the grain that they mill. The truth is I would love to have a grain mill of my own, but I cannot justify the cost of that. So for right now, I'm buying these freshly milled grains. So we start out with 3 cups of flour. Oh, and let me talk to you a little bit about the vessel that I'm using. Because I'm not going to roll it out onto a surface and cut it, I like to contain it in this, which happens to work well because it's shallow and broad. I used to be a pastry chef in restaurants, and when I worked in that setting, I would use like a big bus tub that was reserved just for my baking purposes. But at home, this sort of mimics that shape perfectly. So 3 cups of flour. This is so beautiful. You can't feel it, but it's soft like velvet. We need a little bit of salt. If you were measuring it out, I would say that it's just under a teaspoon. We need a half a teaspoon of baking soda. I also tend to buy this kind of thing in bulk at a co-op, again, because they're fresher, and with your leavening you want it to be fresh. This is baking powder. You need 2.5 teaspoons of that, so you could say just short of a tablespoon. And then I just use like whatever's handy and kind of stir that into the flour. And now we're ready for butter. Butter is another thing that I am fussy about. This happens to be Danish butter, which is my favorite butter, and it literally comes from Denmark. It's called Lurpak. And the reason I prefer it over our American butter is our butter has a little bit more water in it. And with a scone dough, actually I cannot think of a single dough that benefits from added liquid. So we need 12 tablespoons of this, which is 6 ounces. And I don't know metric measurements. So you are going to have to figure that out yourself if you're from some other place. So what we need to do is cut it into pieces. Move this so you can see what I'm doing. And the butter should be cold. If it's not cold, when we go to work it into the flour, it'll want to form, you know, like it'll want to gather together rather than create the sort of cornmeal or rice-like texture that we want it to. All right, so this part I do with my hands. You could do it with a pastry blender. You could do it with 2 knives together. But I don't recommend that you ever use something aggressive like a food processor or even a stand mixer. Your dough just won't be as delicate and buttery if you do that. Have a tendency to get tough. That's never good. So I'm just going to mix this in with my hands until I get a rice-like consistency. All right, so I have been working the butter into the flour, which took me about 5 minutes, I want to say. And this is about what it should look like. It's fine if there's some of these like slightly bigger pieces of butter that's just gonna melt and make it flaky. But it should mostly look like this. And then there are a couple things that I forgot to say. One, I preheated the oven before we even got started talking today. It's on 425. And you always want to make sure, especially with something like a quick bread, which is what a biscuit basically is, or a scone basically is, it needs to be at the right temperature as the scone goes in the oven, because it's only in there for like 8 or 10 minutes. So the last thing you want is it in there for an extra 6 minutes because you didn't preheat the oven. The other thing that I forgot is sugar. But that's good because now I have an excuse to show you my pantry. which I love. So this is my pantry, my favorite room in the house. So we need some sugar in here. Scones don't take a lot of sugar, just a half cup, which that is not a half a cup, that's a quarter cup. So a half a cup of sugar. That's probably enough. I put some sugar on the top as well, so I don't like to load the dough part with much sugar. And that was an okay time to incorporate it because I haven't added any of the wet ingredients. So the wet ingredients are basically the buttermilk, but before I do that, I want to show you what I like to add to the scones. So